about managing apartments, but for many years you didn't actually own properties. Could you just talk a little bit about the mental shifts and the early experiments that maybe set you apart early on? What mistakes hurt the most, and what patterns did you discover that really helped you scale?
Well, thanks, Scott. Well, first of all, I got to say it was probably an awakening more than anything else. I was managing apartments because it was free rent, and I was a poor college student, and that was why. I mean, it wasn't strategic. It wasn't like I went to some seminar or read some book. I was it was survival at the time, uh, and um, what happened was I was an awakening. I was collecting rent, paying the bills, and I slowly started to like see the pieces. Okay, I get it now. Like I understand if there's not enough rent to cover expenses, that's not good. When there's a lot of rent covering expenses, that's good. And I just slowly started to figure out the business from the inside, and then the owner of the building that I was managing, he came over after a few months. He goes, "Hey, thanks for fixing this property," and I said, "Well, you know, I it was just easy for me to paint the units and clean them and fill them up because it was less work. And once I knew that I could stabilize it, then it was less time for me. I just it just made so much sense from a common sense standpoint. And I had grown up. My dad was in the construction battalion in the Navy. I had grown up with a hammer and a paintbrush, and so all that stuff was really easy for me. And it was so once I filled up the property, the value went up, and all of a sudden, after I don't know 6 months, the owner came in and he's like, "Thanks, man, you're crushing it." And I said, "Well, I'm definitely on the wrong side of the desk here, but I do understand what I just did, and I'm glad that I did it." And so that kind of started me in the property management business. And when I realized that owner wasn't the only one. There was a lot of properties that were very poorly managed and severely handicapped from a number of issues, and so I just my first education became going and fixing properties for other people, and then eventually when I got the courage, I said I think I'm ready to try this for myself.
I love that. So you got your hands dirty first. You saw it firsthand by putting your hands into it. You saw the power of real estate, and then you started going yourself. Now, Ken, I'll be honest with you. The first time I learned about you because I opened up this door, and it's a exciting, but it's also a dangerous door of alternative investing. I took my money off Wall Street, right? Came onto Main Street and started to figure out the game of real estate. Now, I was introduced to you through Robert Kiyosaki, right? You've kind of been in his world from the very beginning, and the more I know and the more I've learned about you, you've been really the expertise of the real estate side behind his philosophy. So as we kind of bridge this gap of real estate and Robert Kiyosaki, because you've worked so closely with him for decades, how has that relationship of with Kiyosaki really shaped your philosophy around money, around investing, around just the economy in general?
Oh, it's completely. I will tell you, for me in the beginning, Robert was just, as you know, once you run out of money, you have to look for money, and that's where I was with Robert. I had a friend introduced me to me. He was just an LP, a limited partner, that I was just looking to invest in one deal, and I didn't know, I hadn't read Rich Dad Poor Dad or anything. I didn't realize that who he was. Now, I did understand that he had written the book, and it wasn't long after he had written the book. So we've known each other for over 25 years now. But so I did go buy it, ironically, and I read it before I met with him. And so by the time I met with him, I had read it, and so we talked about the book, and there was some interesting things in the book about what I was already doing. And so I just tied it back to everything I was working on. And then he became an investor. And, we've had an incredible relationship since then and he's built a high amount of trust with us. And as you know, I've scaled my business since then. But I will tell you, going on the road with him and internationally, globally, and I'm talking about Russia, Japan, Asia, Europe, all over Germany, Australia, New Zealand, New Mexico, or Mexico, Canada. It didn't really matter. Everybody, every country had the same excuses as the U.S. So sometimes we're sitting in the U.S. and we're thinking, oh, we're different, and it's not different. Everybody has tax, everybody pays rent, not everyone, and the laws are different, the tax laws are different, and things are different for sure. But it's always the same excuses, and it's always the same system. The government is trying to take money away from Main Street, always, and that's what they use to pay tax for all their stuff. And the I guess the aware or the educated, and by the way, I'm not talking about college educated. I'm just saying the educated. They realize that there are ways to be in the system and not part of it. So I think that that's what I learned, that you don't have to have money to start. Everybody has tax, and you have depreciation, and everybody has real estate, and there's renters and there's homeowners in every market. There's interest rates, and there's banks. Like the systems. Yes, a lot of things are different. Interest rates are different. The tax laws are different. The lending rates are different. The central banks are different. The economies are different. But at the end of the day, the economies are very similar. And so that's what I learned. And Robert's there. I struggled with going all over the world and writing all the books and all that stuff because it took time away from my family and my business. But then it's been a remarkable journey as well to realize that we really are extremely connected. And the philosophy, the financial education philosophy that Robert wrote about in that book, that's why it's in over 40 languages. It's spiritual. That book is spiritual.
It is, and I think you hit the nail right on the head when you say it really comes down to financial education is the key to financial freedom, right? I mean, it's not as easy as just put your money in a 401k anymore. That game has changed. And Robert Kiyosaki pointed that out. And I love that you saw that and help people experience that through real estate.
Yeah, and like there's nothing called a 401k and outside of the US. Yeah. But to your point, every government has created some kind of retirement plan. And so there's a vehicle somewhere, and across some border somewhere that is trying to get money to invest in stock market and through wealth managers and financial planners and insurance companies, and it's really the same. Once I started to realize that the system is set up to take money from Main Street and use it, but just totally fine. I mean, I have no issue with it. It just is what it is. But I didn't understand the rules of the game. It's like I just didn't understand it. And it gave me a macro view that every economy is set up the same. It needs the citizens to pay tax, and it needs their money in a bank, and it needs their money in insurance policies, and it needs their money into these different financial products for the financial services business to operate. And once you realize that you could actually tap into those, like I borrow from insurance companies, I borrow from retirement plans. I went to Canada and we raised $300 million from what they call the RSP, which is our 401k, which is the retirement savings plan, back in 2007, 8, 9, 10, something like that. So once you see it's all connected, that the world really is your oyster.
Yeah. Hey, so Ken, taking like investments and looking at things in different markets, let's look at kind of real estate. Why is real estate a powerful strategy for financial freedom? What makes it unique and special? What makes it a great tool for people to achieve financial freedom?
Well, I always try to say, look at every single economy and where do most people hold their wealth? Number one, right? And if you take a look at just like the U.S., for example, or most others, it sits in they're in the home that they own, right? They pay it off or whatever it is. That is like my mom's a great example. She was a hairdresser her whole life. My sister was a bookkeeper her whole life, but they pay off their houses, and the overwhelming majority of what they have at that point is in that house. And so I start there and I say, well, if that's true, then why not just replicate that? And so, so the cool part about real estate from my standpoint is I haven't found anything else. There are other things, but I haven't found many things that somebody else will pay off for you. And you don't need your own money to buy it. So so you get like the government does their thing. They have inflation. They don't have inflation or whatever. And then you get this inflationary effect, call it, from holding hard assets or real estate in this case. You get to finance it using OPM or other people's money. So that's a blessing. And real quickly on that. So if a bank is sitting on, $1 billion of savings, that's a problem for them. That's an expense. The bank actually owes those customers $1 billion, the interest rate on their savings rate for $1 billion. So they lend it, and that's OPM. So the money that people ironically put into the bank becomes a liability for the bank until they lend it out. And so once you understand that system, so you can actually literally get all the money from someone else. So getting all the money from someone else, having somebody else pay it off, and just having a long-term goal, I think I can't think of anything else. And I know, and let's don't forget the incredible tax benefits that you get from owning it. And of course, like a stock market, I don't know about you, Scott. I've had deals burn. I've had hurricanes. I've had hailstorms. All this stuff. But then my insurance company comes in and fixes it for me. I don't have that and the other stuff either. So when there is an issue, we tap into that insurance and all of a sudden that gets fixed too. So I haven't found anything else that has, for me, been so controllable.
I love that. So you're talking about using OPM, and I think that's the key, right? It's knowing that you're never further away from a deal than if you think you have to bring everything to the table yourself. But once you understand that there's unlimited money, there's unlimited opportunity. And Ken, before we press record on this, I was telling you about an asset that I bought from you. I'm looking back in my folder right now. It's 2015. So it's Tucson 8. That's where it is. It's the Tucson 8 project. And you've been paying me on that for a decade now, a decade straight, right? And I invested in that because I used your expertise. But here's the thing I want to bring up. It's been a decade of consistent payments. And when we fast forward all the way to today, 2025, I think a lot of people are worried the market's overhyped, it's over leveraged, there's no good deals, interest rates are too high. I mean, name the excuse. How do you look at there's always access to money, but there's always access to opportunity, even when markets on the surface may not indicate that there are? So how do you go below the surface to still find opportunities in the game of real estate?
Well, that is definitely the hard part. This is not one of those situations where, okay, I have the money or now I'm ready. Like that still might not be the time, because there's a time to hit the brakes and there's a time to hit the gas. The only way to know that is if you're actually, you've been driving the car for a little while. That's the only way. So you can't. I look at like my son when he got his license, he got in an accident like in the first few months. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt. Why? Inexperience, right? And so, and so after a while, you start to see things differently. You've been on the road. You see other drivers' behavior. Now, it's just an interesting analogy. You can't just jump into real estate and like you can just getting your license and driving a car. You have to actually kind of do it. You have to buy one, then you buy two, then you have to understand tenant behavior. You can't read about it. You can't watch about it on YouTube. You have to sit down across from a bank and be on the side where they say no. You have to have a deal where you don't have the money and you need to figure it out. Even on that Tucson 8 deal back in 2015, I remember exactly what happened was the, the there was an 8 property deal that was coming out of what was called the housing authority, where the low income component was burning off in a year and a half, and so in order for us to get that deal, Ross and I had to put $1 million up hard, non-refundable day one personally, and we did it. And that, that was 10 years ago. So you imagine, I was like, well, so obviously we dug into the 8 deals. We looked at it. And inside of those 8 deals, that's where the value add came from. And there were things that property owner wasn't doing that they just hadn't kept up with the times. So kind of back to that property management side of the business, I was looking at it from an operational standpoint, and I said, these are all the ways that we can increase value, and we did, as you know. So I had the confidence that we could put up that $1 million, and I could create the value and get that back, and so that not only yourself but all the other investors and Ross and I could benefit from that. And so I think that comes from driving that car for a while. That comes from seeing the actual deal and understanding that, how a lot of people focus on cash flow or cash on cash, and I think that's important. My main objective is my cash back. That's a big difference. Like, how am I going to get my cash back without selling the property? And so, that's return of capital, not return on capital. And I think it's a big, big difference with a lot of these, folks that come into the market late where they're looking to, and by the way, I think you have to do that. You have to check that box. How much, if I invest in this, how much am I going to get back? And what's my, am I going to be better off in a T-bill, or am I better off in this deal? I get that. But for me, it's a bigger view. And so with that, the answer to your question is it's extremely hard to find those deals. But when you do, then you know.
You know what? I want to piggyback on that. And Scott, I'm going to ask one more question, then let's take it into the type of assets that we want to talk about. But Ken, you're so good at what you do. And when you talk about time under tension, right? I mean, I'm sure you've learned through the school of hard knocks, through losses. I mean, I don't know if you guys caught what Ken just said. He had to put up $1 million inflation adjusted a decade ago. That's close to $2.5 million today of his own money, just to be able to look at doing due diligence. And the number one question that he's asking is, how do I get my money back? Now, Ken, this summit is specifically focused on helping people own real estate, not necessarily do real estate. So for context on this, I want you to kind of open up the playbook a little bit and talk about what it means to be a professional real estate investor. And you've given me the opportunity to step into your world and own a part of real estate, but leverage, not just OPM, but leverage OPE, other people's experience, right? Your experience as a deal maker, that's paid me, and it's allowed me to have what I want, which is profit and time. And it's allowed you to get profit by me bringing money into your deal. But how does someone, if they want to get into it professionally, because we're advocating do it passively, right? Own an asset, but don't do the work to flip it and manage it like you do. Talk us through a little bit what it takes to be a professional real estate investor like you are.
Well, thank you. I as I said, if you want to go back to when I got a degree, I wrestled in college, that's how I got there. And I did not at the time have do I want to be a real estate professional in my brain? And as you know, my wife, she's got 5 now. My sister, who was a bookkeeper her whole life at the Everett Clinic, which is what area that I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. She had several $1 million of paid off real estate by the time she decided to retire. So you can take it a few ways, right? You can take it you don't have to be all in the beginning is what I mean. Like you start off with 1 and then you do 2, then you do 3, then you do 4. And what actually happens, Ryan, is you realize that you're going to make a lot more money doing this than you are, so I don't actually advocate people to kind of jump over at all. I say, just do one, pay it off, do 2, pay it off. My wife's parents are looking, they're retiring actually right now. And I said, well, why are you guys retiring? It's because they own a bunch of real estate that's paid off. That's why. Like, period. And by the way, I would not put them in the real estate investor category or the professional at all. I would not put my sister there. Daniille's on her way, and I think that she wants to, do that. No, but I always say, I just think that you should consider it as opposed to putting all your money in Wall Street or something like that. So now, once you dip your toe in the water and you start to see the cash flow, you start to see how the community is, right, which is super supportive. They help you find lenders, they help you find contractors, they help you find equity, they help you, they mentor you along, they coach you, and I'm not talking about, it doesn't even have to be paid. Like, these are people that you can run into if you're just, in the right circles, and so obviously. For a lot of people, they do take that next step, and they they go double down, and so I always tell people, start slow, make small mistakes, make small investments, and build your team, and then if you like it, great. If you don't, then just do it every once in a while. But what I've found is that once they kind of see that, oh, you kidding me? I get these kinds of tax benefits and I can offset my ordinary income. Yeah. What? And then, Daniille's now obsessed, right? And I've watched her. I mean, by the way, she was a teacher, school teacher. And then, then she started a little business that wasn't scalable. So she sold that. And then she became an esthetician. So she did all of this just one at a time. And only now, last summer, she got a real estate license. But, after, I don't know, 5-6 years of owning, a few. And so now she's full on, raring to go. But it took her a while, I think, to trust the system, to trust the cash flow, to trust how it works. Some people jump straight into the pool. Not her. Like, she starts with one toe, and then you got to talk her into the second one. But that's okay. I think you got to meet people where they're at.
I love that.
Yeah. So talking about Daniille's experience, starting with single family, and that toe in the water. Looking at that, you work on a lot of big projects, multifamily. But why do you believe single family rentals are kind of a good entry point? Why are they a good place for people to start building a real estate portfolio? Why do you like them as an asset class?
Well, they're it's the masses, right? So you look at whatever one. There's so many ways to do it, and there's so many ways to exit. So there's you can make it you can live in it. You can make it a long-term rental. You can house hack it. You can BRRRR it, which is the refinance out. You can Airbnb it. Like, there's this, just like once you start to realize that it's not just a house, it's there's lots of options. I have a buddy that I'm from the Seattle area, and he just goes and finds these houses on these huge lots, and he'll put one or two more on there, and that's it. So what happens is you start to see all the options, from density, or how many you can put on there, or height, or maybe you rip it down and you build something, or there's just there's so many ways, and there's so many moves, and so that's why I like the single family house option, because and by the way, I think it completely trumps apartments, which is what I'm in, right? I've got 10,000 apartments. If I had a choice with a garage, a yard, and a family, that's where I'm going. I'm not going into a 3-bedroom apartment, and for all the obvious reasons. So, single family homes have always been the go-to, especially if you can get them affordable. And so, when I'm trying to buy apartments, I'm completely cognizant of the single family home prices in the neighborhood next to me. If they're really close, I pass, because given the choice, the person's going to go to the single family. If, like I just bought a building in Las Vegas where the homes in the area are $2 to $4 million. And the apartment building is next to a Whole Foods. And so the rents are, let's call it $2,000. But the jump to the neighborhood next door is significant. So people, so that kind of keeps the occupancy high. So there's a strategy for both. But for me, you can buy affordably. I know, Scott, you and I were just at our mastermind recently. You were telling me that you were looking in the Detroit area. And I was looking at the numbers over lunch when we were having lunch, and the numbers are off the charts, like, for the amount of money you put down and for the rent, the return. So at the end of the day, but again, when you start, you don't know what to look for. You just think, oh my gosh, Detroit, why would I ever go to Detroit? Because all you've heard is the legacy issues, but like everything, markets come and go. They're in favor at times and they're not in other times. And that's the beauty of the business. And so I think, and also, as my good friend used to do with homes, he looked at markets as diversification. So he would have one in Boise, one in Vegas, one in Seattle, one in Scottsdale, let's say, one in Denver, one in, and I said, why do you have these all over the place? He said, well, for me, it's like my stock market. Sometimes the Boise market's really strong, sometimes it's not, sometimes Denver's strong, sometimes it's not. So he looks at markets as diversification, and I thought that was a pretty good strategy, and it really worked well for him.
That's a great insight there, doing that, getting a little single family home spread out and diversifying. That way you don't have all your eggs in one basket. That's pure gold, pure gold.
I love that. So, Ken, to ask you just a couple more questions to close this out, you have given us so much value. Now, I know for you, you got going property manager, right? Get your hands dirty out of necessity. But I think over time, I've seen you becoming more contribution minded, right? You're wanting to give back. You're wanting to figure out how to get younger generations involved, wanting to help. I mean, your YouTube channel, your Instagram, everything you do is to help empower people with money, which is so much appreciated. As you look at your kids growing up, getting into the real estate markets, what would you tell, what advice would you give to the younger generation, specifically your son, right, to get into the real estate world today, even when it feels like prices are high, rents haven't caught up, interest rates? What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, well, thank you. I feel, I feel like every time it feels monumental at the beginning. Like every single time, like as Scott knows, he's an avid hiker. I took both my kids to Kilimanjaro when they turned 17. And, so I look at the mountain the same way I look at when they, when they are going to get ready to buy that first real estate deal. It's the same. How am I going to do that? How am I going to climb that? I don't have the money. I don't have the experience. What if I lose everything? I don't know lenders. I don't know property managers. All the stuff that people think about is what I try to do on my YouTube channel. As you know, it's a blessing for me to have to be able to communicate that out and help people shortcut some of the things that I've learned over this period of time. And then now we do that live event in called Limitless, which has been just a incredible, where we bring in 50 some speakers and I just think that the you know, the traditional education doesn't teach us about money, and we all know, you guys included, that you have to figure that out, and we figure that out on the street. Like, we figure that out from people that sometimes we get taken by it, and sometimes we make mistakes, and I that's okay. I do believe that. I think that's part of the process. But if I can help people shortcut some of those things, and make good decisions and speed things up, even with your book, retiring in 10 years, that's coming out soon. I you know I wish I would have started 10 years earlier. And I think, it just seems so obvious now as I look back, and Jobs said that, you can connect the dots looking backwards. It's very hard to connect them looking forward, and you got to have a little bit of faith, and you got to have a little bit of trust, and you got to kind of know, who to follow and who not to follow it. And I think so for me, that's been what's driving me.
Well, Ken, I've got to just say thank you, as an investor, as someone who's learned so much from you over the years. How do people get connected with you? We're going to drop all the links, but if you wanted someone to come follow you, how do people get connected with you directly?
Yeah, it's just kenmcelroy.com. So KenMcelroy.com. And that leads you to everything. And I think, you can find all the different things we're doing. And we're just having a blast over here. I got to tell you, like, it's a completely, this little side hustle has turned into for me, it gives me a lot of my why. I'm at the age now where I'm kind of on a rinse and repeat flywheel with my business. Sometimes we get like that. I know for some of you starting, it's hard for you to imagine, but trust me, it's like after been doing something a long time. I wish it gave me the joy each and every time, like it did when I first started. And so the YouTube channel, the education, and all that stuff kind of gives me my why. So it's really, really a blessing.
Well, it comes through. It really does, Ken. I mean, I can feel your fire, your passion, and with Anil, I can feel her excitement and expertise growing with every single episode. It's really, really cool what you guys are doing. So let me ask you the pinnacle question. I'm gonna kind of build you up for just a minute, because we've had several people that I've interviewed, me and Scott, on this summit, and we've asked every single person one common question. And these are people that we all look up to, we aspire to. They're smart, they're capable in their own right, but very few people could actually give a definitive answer. And I already have a feeling of what your answer is going to be to this. But Ken, let's say we had to wipe everything out for you. Okay, no more real estate, no more 10,000 doors. You can still have all your connections, all of your mindset, your knowledge, your experience and expertise, but no money in the bank, no assets to rely on, and you've got 10 years. You're starting all over. Over the next 10 years, you can work, you can earn, you can save, and you can invest. But after 10 years, you can never work for money again. And whatever you've earned and built over this next 10 years has to support your lifestyle, your legacy, whatever you want that to be, for the rest of your life and into future generations. Give me a playbook. What would you do over the next 10 years to ensure you were free and you had the legacy that you could leave to anyone you wanted to leave a legacy to financially?
Well, the first thing I think is success means something different for everyone. So what I think you got to define that. So, and mine certainly changed. When I was a young person, I would say that it was more financial based. Today, it's not, right? It's relationship, health, and relationship with my wife, my kids, and my friends, and things like that. Now, again, that doesn't pay the bills, so I do understand that. But I do think that So you got to kind of define what that means to you. So I'll just break it down financially. So if let's just say that your financial goal today is 10,000 a month. Okay. Um, you have to start with some kind of a goal, and maybe that's a 10-year goal. Maybe it needs to be more, but let's just say we'll start there. So what does that mean? That means that then you reverse engineer. So, but you have to start with a goal. Otherwise, you're not going to. All roads lead to nowhere. You have to, even if the goal changes. So in my personal life and my business life, I have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10-year goal, and I revisit it every year, every single year. So, and I actually meet quarterly as well. So I meet quarterly in between, but I have a 1, 3, 5, and 10. So let's say your goal in 10 years is 10,000. Just to pick a number. That means that you need to buy 10 properties at $1,000 a month cash flow, or 20 properties at $500,000 of cash flow, whatever. Like, you just reverse engineer it. Okay, now you at least have a target, an end road, whatever that is. Now, the interesting thing is you're going to start, and then you're going to figure out how to do that. Okay, I need to buy one property at 1,000. Well, that's when everything starts to be a little more clear. So I would say for the first 1 to 3 years, the only thing you should be doing is trying to hit that goal. And my guess is that you will probably do that in the first 3 years. That would be my guess, based on my personal experience of mentoring and coaching enough people, that you're going to set a 10-year goal, and you're going to, if you're intentional, you're going to probably do it in the first 3. Now, you may or may not, but the point is, at least you're on your way. And then each year you're revisiting. And then during years, let's say 3 to about 7, you can figure out how to scale it, flywheel it, whatever you want to call it, whatever buzzwords you want to use. But that's when you start to build out your team, like Scott's doing now, right? Expand to new markets, things work locally. You start with that one toe in the water, and now you got both feet in the water, and now maybe you're up to your waist, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm gonna start swimming out to the deep end, and I'm gonna try for Orlando. I'm gonna try for Detroit. So that's what we did. So we went to other markets. We're in Las Vegas, we're in Houston, we're in Dallas, we're in San Antonio, we're in Fort Worth. Those are all things that we did next. And then then of course you got a zillion things that go wrong and right during that period of time, and that gives you time to figure that out. And then what happens is, by the way, at this point, I'm still not selling. I'm holding, and I'm letting the tenants pay everything off, and I'm benefiting from the tax. So now you're 7 years in, and then in 8, 9, and 10, now you start to harvest, and you start to harvest some cash, and you got to make sure that you don't have the lifestyle creep come in, because that's what kills a lot of people. And that's when you start to see multiple houses, or a jet, or these exotic cars, or whatever they might be, things that are, I would call them, unfocused. And so in 8, 9, and 10, that's when you start to take a look, and then you reposition assets. So let's say you bought 30, 40 properties. I guarantee you have a top 20 list and a bottom 20 list. And so what you do is you sell those bottom 20 back out into the market. You never get rid of the top 20. And then then you go for that second or third bite of the apple. That's what I would do.
That was such a beautiful playbook, man. I'm ready to go out and get I love the way you said with clarity it goes from 10 to 3. I think clarity is the key, right? The 1 year, the 3 year, or the 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. That's such a powerful, and then revisiting it every 90 days. Scott, why don't you close us out? Ken, you have given so much wisdom today. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Ken, yeah, thanks so much. It's great. Somebody's been around, seen so much, care about so much, and I just love how much you give back. I mean, your YouTube channel and all that you do there, you give nuggets of wisdom every single week to make a difference. So I know I've learned so much just listening to you, watching you, seeing how you analyze things and do it. So I've been blessed and benefited greatly. And I can't think of a better resource for people that are watching this than to go to kenmcelroy.com, follow you, check you out. You're just a great trailblazer that a lot of us are drafting off of and benefiting. So thanks so much for all of the wisdom you shared today.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Yeah, for sure.